Welcome, everyone. My name is Lisa Reagan. I'm the founder of Kindred World, the co-founder of the Evolve Nest Initiative, and the editor for Kindred Magazine. And I am so happy to see you here today. And I just wanted to take a moment and remind everyone what is our vision at Kindred for this wisdom-based, wellness-informed world. And I'll begin by saying at our inception over 27 years ago, we're following the work of Joseph Chilton Pearce. And Pearce showed us from the beginning in his books, The Magical Child and The Crack in the Cosmic Egg, and many, many others, that it is culture that is the problem. As he said, we create culture, we forget we create culture, and then we think that culture is creating us. This is not true. This is what we need to flip on its head right now. And we're going to do that with the science of who we really are, including returning to the baselines of wellness through our Evolved Nest, which, if you read my editorial this month, is about getting us rooted. And then with this rootedness, we are able to expand into our great vision uh, that takes us above the forest line, like the mother trees, and shows us what is really possible, where we really are in this orientation of life. And this is our kinship worldview. That we are connecting here with the mother tree wisdom. So I thank you for coming today. And with that, here are the housekeeping pieces. I know that there's a lot going on in the world, and some of us are sad and some of us are happy. This is the cultural piece that we leave outside the door when we come in. And I'm especially speaking of any political references. We need you to join us in this higher ground, in this higher place right now, so we can really listen today. For example, we have Eugene Malthouse with us from the United Kingdom, who is a postdoc student who is doing research using the Evolved Nest science. Thank you so much, Eugene, for coming. And we're going to hear from him. And we want to be able to hear all of your questions and all of your comments. So we are recording today because we want to capture what Eugene is saying. So thank you again for being here. I'll also introduce Barbara Rivera, who is our safety monitor, again, trying to keep everyone safe enough to keep your immune systems and nervous systems able to respond and flowing and sharing your ideas with us. We want to hear what you have to say. If you don't feel safe, you feel like something odd and uncomfortable is happening, please contact Barbara in the direct messaging of the chat over here in the corner, or wave. So thank you so much again for coming. And with that, Darcia is going to help us ground.
Um, all right, so here we are. We have many, many people, many spirits gathering here today, and we want to be heart-minded, centered in our deeper selves, which many of our cultures or societies don't welcome. And so we kind of hide that part of us. We kind of just put our nose to the grindstone and get through the day or get our work done. So let's take a moment to unfold our inner beings. Why don't you close your eyes and take several belly breaths. When you take 6 deep belly breaths, it changes your metabolism towards well-being. So breathe deeply now. And as you breathe in relaxation. This alpha brainwave state, which is what we want to get to, that receptive alertness. Breathing in relaxation, and then breathe out any tension, let it outside the door. Any worries, any concerns, you breathe them out. They can pile up there. You can pick them up later or just let them go. So you're breathing in relaxation from the top of your head, like a gentle shower. Breathing it in all the way down through your body, relaxation in, any tension out, all the way to your tippy toes. And then open. Feel then as you relax that the center of your being, your heart space, your belly space opens, gets soft, and lets the light out and lets the light in. So with your feet on the ground, wherever you are. Feel yourself connected to Earth. Even if you're on the 10th story of a building, it is all Earth. The flooring, the carpeting, everything is from Mother Earth. So feel that energy coming up from Mother Earth into your feet and coming all the way up as another grounding kind of energy, all the way up to the top of your head, the crown of your head. All this energy from the cosmos, from the earth, joining together to let your inner space feel safe and feel loved by the cosmos, by earth. And then you can be here together with us. So when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And we're very happy to have you here with us. We are about, it's a discussion group to talk about the Evolved Nest in various ways that we have been presenting it to the world. So the 3 films, the Breaking the Cycle film, I'll go through these very quickly. Our first 6-minute film, Breaking the Cycle, uh, based on my 2014 book, and showing that this way of being that most of us are in, the cycle of competitive detachment, is not our heritage. We got off the rail, we got off the wellness pathway to this cycle of competitive detachment. Rather than our heritage for millions of years, there's a cycle of cooperative companionship. So that's a very 6-minute quick overview of that issue. The second film, The Evolved Nest, Nature's Way of Raising Children, is based on this book with Gay Bradshaw, a wonderful colleague and animal activist and writer. And we talk about different animal nests and then always relate them to the human nest and how much alike or different we are. And then the third film is Reimagining Humanity, which is based in the indigenous worldview, which we also call the kinship worldview. And this is based in, it's related to this book, which is with my colleague Four Arrows or Wahink Patopa. It's a dialogue book. We take 28 quotes from Native peoples and discuss them, and they represent aspects of the indigenous or kinship worldview. And we have the Worldview Literacy Project, which is based in Four Arrows' work over many years, where he's collected kind of manifestations of the indigenous or kinship worldview, contrasting them with the dominant worldview, which we all know so well, we swim in it. And you can go to the worldviewliteracy.org website and dive in and explore, the differences between the 2 worldviews. So Reimagining Humanity, the third film, is trying to awaken us to another of our heritages, which is this worldview. And we need to return. That's sort of once we change our imagination about who we can be, that's sort of a top-down way of transformation. We all have to realize, oh, it doesn't have to be this way. We can do this, and then we can take steps towards that, returning to that way of being. And the Evolved Nest is the bottom-up way. How we raise our young shapes us for the indigenous or kinship worldview. So we want to do both at the same time. Each of us, wherever we are in our life space, you might be able to work with the younger ages more, or the older ages and the adults. And anyway, we need to bring the 2 together to transform the future. And I'll introduce now, I got rainbows on my face. Uh, so I'm going to introduce Eugene Malthouse, postdoc in the United Kingdom, who contacted me a few months ago to say that they're using our indigenous, I'm sorry, not indigenous, the Evolved Nest history measure with adults that we have. It's, I can't remember how many items it is, really 20 some, I think, and has collected data in the United States and in the United Kingdom. And you can say more, Eugene, about your kind of academic grounding there. You're not a developmental psychologist, so maybe a little bit about how you came to the study design, and then give us some results. Very exciting. Welcome.
Thanks, Darcia, and really nice to see everyone. I'm going to share my screen a second here. So yeah, as Darcia said, I'm a postdoc at the University of Nottingham, and I mainly study psychology and a bit of economics, and try to understand why are we nice to each other in the world? Why do we cooperate? And particularly, what does that mean for things like climate change? You know, how do we get everyone working together with some of these big global challenges? But this research was a slightly different direction. I read the book by Darcia, the Evolved Nest book, and I thought, wow, this is fascinating. And can I look at people's early life experience and the extent to which this might impact their health and people's health and well-being in adulthood, but maybe also the extent to which they trust other people and cooperate with others, and what their relationships are like with others as well. So continuing to contribute to a lot of the research that Darcia's done over the years. So that's what I'm going to talk about. But before I do, I just wanted to share this excerpt that we found, well, my uncle found a couple of weeks ago from my grandmother's diary that she wrote in 1963. This is my grandmother, Yoni, she's Greek, on the left-hand side, with my mum and her siblings. And what she wrote was, I think, very relevant. She wrote, "We ought to have a double bed to take us all. This is the natural thing for children to sleep with their parents, but our civilization has obliterated this natural phenomenon which gives the children so much comfort and security." She says, "I think there would be much less neurosis in children if they felt the warmth of their parents' bodies close to them at bedtime." So that's given me renewed motivation for all of this work, because I feel like the nested pathway is in my blood. So here's the study. We're interested, as I said, we're interested in the impact of the evolved nest experience as a child in your health and well-being in adulthood. So what we did is we ran an online study. We recruited about 500 people from the UK and 500 people from the US, all of whom are aged 18 to 34, because we're going to ask about their experience growing up. So we want people for whom that's a more recent experience. And we do that using Darcia's questionnaire, which I'm going to show you a little bit of on the next slide. And then it's quite a simple study. We then ask them some questions about their health and well-being, their attachment style, and their trust in other people, and a few other things. And that enables us to ask a few research questions. We can ask, are more nested people generally happier and healthier? Do they have a more secure attachment style? I'll talk about what that means a little bit later for anyone who's not familiar with that terminology. And if so, what does that mean for their relationships with others? What does that mean for their general outlook in life? Okay. So here's the questionnaire. We ask people to think back to when they were growing up, so age between 0 and 18, and we asked them about all the different components of the evolved nest. So we asked them about how much extensive affectionate touch they experienced. How often were they affectionately touched or kissed or hugged by one of their parents or guardians, and equally, how often were they hit or spanked? How much did they play freely with others, free play with other children, not necessarily just play organized by adults? How much did they do that outside and inside? How often did they do things together as a family outside the homes? How often did they go to shows and go to the park or community events? How often did they do things inside the home together, like doing chores together or eating dinners together, those kinds of activities? And then we ask also about the emotional climate. So how often did people feel joy and expansive and self-assured and serene when they were growing up? And on the flip side, how did they feel more negative emotions, we might say, like guilt or fear or anger? Okay. And all of these questions are, the response options are very little or not at all to at 1, and then we score it all the way to very much at 5. So people just try to indicate how frequently they experience these things in their upbringing. And what that means is we can calculate a score, right? What we call the composite score for each person from 1 to 5, where 1 is going to be very unnested and 5 is going to be maximum nestedness, and then lots of people will be somewhere in the middle. Is that clear for everyone? Does anyone have any questions about how that works? I'll take silence as yes. Great. So now I'm going to show you the responses to the other questions we asked, and the graphs are going to look quite similar. Okay, so we're always going to have this composite score from 1 to 5, very unnested to very nested on the right hand side at the bottom, and then we're going to have the responses to the questions on this y-axis here. So this question was, how is your health in general these days? And people can say very bad, bad, fair, good, or very good. And when I plot these things together, what you can see is that this is just a line of best fit. So obviously the data are kind of both sides of it, but it's just illustrating the general average trend and showing that if you're very, very unnested, you're much more likely to say that your health is fair in general. But on the other side over here, if you're very, very nested, you're more likely to be somewhere between good and very good. And we can do fancy statistical things that control for your income and your education level to take those things into account, and this effect of nestedness remains on your general health. Okay. Also really, really, really consistent between the UK and the US. So then we ask a few other questions about well-being. So these are all questions that in the UK, when we do our national census every 10 years, we ask people these, I say we, the government asks people these questions. So top left here, what you've got is, in general, how satisfied are you with your life these days from 0 to 10? And as you might have guessed, what we can see is that more nested people are generally much more satisfied with their life these days. We ask them, here's life worthwhile down here, to what extent do you feel like the things you do in life are worthwhile? And we see a very, very similar pattern. Again, more nested people really feeling like their life is more worthwhile in some way. We then ask them, how happy were you yesterday? Very, very similar pattern. And then the last thing we ask them is, how anxious did you feel yesterday? Again, from 0 to 10. And we see the opposite effect, right? So more nested people feeling kind of 2.5 anxiety out of 10 yesterday compared to the less nested people on average being a little bit more anxious. The other thing to say here is that when you look at income and education, a lot of the time actually with life satisfaction and happiness yesterday, there is a little positive effect of higher income. But the interesting thing with anxiety yesterday is that there's no effect, right? So it's not like the richer you get, the less anxious you get. Actually, this stuff goes way back. It's much deeper within you. Okay, any questions? All right, great. So attachment is this concept that a lot of psychologists have looked at over the years, and generally speaking, we try to understand whether people are securely attached or insecurely attached in their relationships with others. So maybe let me give you an example of that to illustrate. What we do is we present people with this paragraph. We say, and we ask them the extent to which they feel that this describes them either extremely well or not at all. So we ask people, do you think is it easy for you to become emotionally close to others and you're comfortable depending on others and having others depend on you and not worrying about being alone, or having others not accept you? And we have this scale from 1 does not describe me at all to 7 describes me extremely well. So this is a description about someone who is a secure attachment style. And the higher that score, the closer to 7 that is, the more secure they are in their relationships with others. So then we can look at, well, does your experience of the evolved nest, is that associated with a more secure attachment style? And Darcia has found this about 15 times. So maybe this is the 16th time that this has been established, but it's the very same pattern. So I'm just replicating exactly what Darcia's found many times here, that more nested people have a more secure attachment style. And so what does that mean for people's relationships? Well, we asked them lots of questions about their relationships with other people. On the top left here, we've got, to what extent, in general, how much do you trust most other people from 0 to 10? You're starting to see the pattern here, right? We ask people, how satisfied are you with your personal relationships? Again, more nested people, generally more satisfied with their personal relationships. We ask people, to what extent do you feel like you can rely on others if you have a serious problem? Again, more nested people agree that they have others that they can rely on if they have a problem. And the last one is, to what extent do you feel like you belong to your community and your neighborhood? And again, more nested people generally have a stronger sense of belonging to their local community. I could show you another 100 graphs, but I'm just going to show you one more. And this is about personal relative deprivation. And I think this is interesting because it is trying to understand, how do people feel in relation to others? And what we do is we ask them about a series of statements. So we say, to what extent do you agree or disagree with these statements? So one of them is, I feel deprived when I think about what I have compared to what other people like me have. And I feel resentful when I see how prosperous other people like me seem to be, right? So we're trying to get a sense of, how do people feel in relation, in a kind of statusy way, to others? And we calculate a score from 1 to 6 based on their agreement. So the more they agree with these statements, the higher their score. Or on the flip side, the lower their score, the weaker their sense of personal relative deprivation. And what we can see is, again, more nested people feel less deprived in relation to the others. They're not feeling resentful about their situation in the same way that unnested people might be. And the other reason I put this on there is that we can look at people's income as well, and it has no effect. So you can earn $200,000 a year, but you're still not going to feel less deprived than someone who earns a little bit less, if you're unnested. So I think this is quite interesting as well. So that's enough, I think, because I'd love to hear people's thoughts. But I'll just conclude by saying what we found again. We find that experience of the evolved nest is associated with better health, higher life satisfaction, greater happiness, less anxiety, more secure attachment, more trust in others, better personal relationships, stronger sense of belonging, weaker feelings of personal relative deprivation. As I said, that there are many more findings here. It's associated with your engagement in your local community, the likelihood that you volunteer, the likelihood that you feel like you have a say in what the government does, your belief that the world is a good and safe place. But those are all findings for another day. So I'll stop there. Thanks so much for listening, and I think we'll send the paper around once.
Can I ask one last question from the end? You said, just because people are making more money, they're not going to feel less deprived, and that confuses me. What did that last slide say?
Well, so what you could imagine is, if I was to put income at the bottom here, there would be basically a horizontal line. So it's not like if your income goes up, you feel less. That doesn't just mean you feel less deprived, right? Because you're always looking up or at those people around you, and getting a higher income doesn't solve that if you're unnested, right? So I thought that was interesting, because a lot of people would think, well, if I earn more money, then I'm going to feel less deprived, right? But that's not the case.
Right.
What we find. Thanks for the question. Yeah.
Wonderful, Eugene. Thank you so much. And yeah, I really appreciate what you're doing, and doing a lot of new information you're giving the world, but also replicating some things, and both in the UK and the US. That's fantastic. So thank you. Can't wait for the paper.
We might be doing, I just heard yesterday, we might be doing Japan as well
Oh,
next
cool.
few weeks. So that
All
would be
right.
interesting.
We're fine. So Kathy, go ahead. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this Zoom call, Darcia. So a way to understand healthy attachment is to understand its opposite rather, which is fusion to trauma. So I say we're living in a trauma shroud, and I relate it to the Stockholm Syndrome. So fusion to the perpetrator is unhealthy attachment. So fusion rather than attachment.
Helpful. Thank you. Yep. We are not in an attachment-oriented culture these days. So here's a question from Jackie. Can a present situation or present situations unnest you? Yeah, nestedness is a lifelong need, and it's only the first two aspects of the evolved nest that are focused only on the young children, the soothing perinatal experience and breastfeeding. But everybody needs a welcoming social climate of feeling like you belong. Everyone needs affectionate touch, no punishing touch. Everyone needs play, silly play with others, self-directed, not organized, but just being silly. Multiple adult or nurturers or mentors, people who know, who can guide us. We need that throughout our lives. We also need responsive relationships, people who listen to us, who respect us, respect our dignity. And then we also need nature immersion and connection and restorative healing practices. So those are the 9 components. We need them throughout life. And yeah, we live in societies that are very mobile. And so you kind of lose your nested groundedness when you move away from perhaps your nurturing family and friends. And then you have to kind of redo it, right? You have to take it on, especially in places like the United States, which is kind of anti-nest. Other countries are can be more nurturing. So
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe just add, I
Yes.
think
Eugene,
you've done some research on, having that nestedness can protect you against things that might unnest you.
Yeah. Oh, good point. Yeah. So you're more resilient.
And you've already done that study, the ACEs and how the evolved nest buffers against ACEs. You might want to just speak to that. And I think we're kind of talking about, if we tease this question out a little bit, the nestedness in early life and what it offers our nervous system, our immune system that you captured in your book from 2014, and then the nestedness that we have to do as adults to get ourselves grounded in an unnested culture. So, but that study that you did with it, you kind of already showed that the evolved nest offers buffering for the adverse childhood experiences.
Right. We looked at our mothers in our longitudinal sample and asked them about their ACEs, their adverse childhood experiences. We asked them about the evolved nest history, the measure that Eugene just talked about. And then we also measured the functioning of their vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve, which is related, innervates all the major systems of the body, the lungs, the brain, the gut, and the immune system. And when it's disordered, you have health problems in one or more areas. And we found that the functioning of their vagus nerve was negatively impacted by that ACEs, but the evolved nest experience buffered that effect. So it improved their health even in situations of adversity.
But you're saying that, so the answer is like the nestedness makes you more resilient.
Early on, so we're making a distinction there. So I was talking about how you as an adult have to re-nest yourself, But then Eugene and Lisa point out the importance of early experience and having the nestedness that builds a very resilient neurobiology. Essentially, your stress response system works well, your vagus nerve works well, other systems. And then when you do have adversity later, it doesn't impact you as much. It doesn't have the negative effect as much as if you didn't have nestedness early on, which means you easily get triggered. When you're not nested early, your stress response is going to be easily triggered, and you see threat everywhere, and your vision narrows, and you don't see many possibilities for action except for self-protection. So that's from unnestedness, kind of impairs your free will for life unless you get good healing and other potential interventions. Play is a great intervention. Go play with kids under 7. They'll force you to be in the present moment and be there with them and be silly and this is free play, and that grows your capacities various ways. Your right hemisphere, which is underdeveloped in unnested early care. So I'm rainbow over here. Okay, are we ready to go to Katie? Hi, Katie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And Eugene, thanks very much for that talk. I guess I'm interested to know what the reception is that you've had to those findings. Both this question's directed to you, Eugene, and Darcia, you more broadly. Outside of people that are perhaps maybe already sort of subscribed to this way of thinking, outside of people, like how does this go down? Florence is also asking. Does that question make sense?
Well, yes, my experience presenting just the evolved nest in general about and data to support it is resisted by people who study child development, people who study mostly northern or global north people from the States and Europe. They kind of resist, especially the females professionals, because they were told that it didn't matter. Mothering doesn't really matter. It's just baby has genes and that and nothing you can do about how their personality turns out. All false information, but that's the culture. The culture treats us all like objects. And so there's resistance there. The global south people nod their heads and they'll say, "Oh, thank you for telling us about the science behind what we do." Automatically, right? So yeah, it's been an uphill push. That's part of the reason why I retired to just work on public education, because it was like so hard to publish things academically. But now Eugene will have better luck. He's got a lot of data there and funding for it. So Eugene, you want to say anything?
No, I mean, only that I presented this to a group of economists today, so that's always an experience. And I think the challenge that I have in those circles is trying to demonstrate causality, right? How can we really show that the evolved nest here explains this, and it's not just that these things are associated, which is a challenge. So I think really for me it's about using lots of different ways, whether it's studies like this, but Darcia's been doing these longitudinal studies where you follow people over time and really just trying to build up a picture from lots of different perspectives and lots of different ways to find the patterns that are there.
Yeah, and there's we can't do the experiments, of course, right? You can't put one set of babies into a home with no touch and non-responsiveness and no play and all that stuff. But we have animal studies, as cruel as they've been, to show us what happens when you don't have touch. That's Harry Harlow. Back in the 50s, 40s, 50s, he was doing things with young monkeys and separating them at birth from their mothers. And then they never grew out of being either aggressive or autistic and unable to be social. And he talked about it as mother love. And there was some focus on mothering and mother love in the 40s and 50s. And then because the culture shifted to with less ability of men to earn the living wage to take care of the whole family. Women had to go to work. And so then the culture kind of rationalized that was fine for them to do that. Mothers could go. And then they had to minimize the needs of babies. And so that's where we've been for quite a while. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question unless anyone else.
Go ahead, Katie.
Josh, you mentioned that particularly females, you found sort of particularly critical of your way of thinking. Have you done any work into why you think that is? Is it just because they see it as a personal attack, or?
I think that's mostly it, mom shaming.
Yeah.
Right. So whether it's a female editor or a female scientist, not everyone, but they, start yelling at me. I got kicked out of Psychology Today because I was there for almost 13 years writing a blog, and they brought in a new editor who was kind of all about don't coddle your children, and she wrote a book about it, and yeah, didn't want to hear about babies too much and indigenous wisdom and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of resistance. It's hard. I mean, you're traumatized yourself, and so you put up a big ego barrier and a grasp onto a worldview that makes you feel like you're safe and usually superior to all those other people who have these strange worldviews, right? And it's really hard for people. It takes, to let go of that is painful. You have to be able to get through the pain. If you've been traumatized as in your childhood and you go to therapy, oh, it's so hard to get through it. But then once you're on the other side, it's like, wow, it's freedom. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know life could be so beautiful. But you have to go through the pain. It's like a hero's journey, a heroine's journey of some sort to get through whatever those, it's even not pre-verbal, right? The pain is pre-verbal when you're a baby and you're left alone. My God, that is cruelty, right? And you don't have words for it, but you have a deep sense of being unwanted. And there's so many ways that we promote baby ACEs, birth practices, and so on. We could talk forever about all the baby ACEs we do. So it takes some effort to move away from the traumatized fusion, right? That Kathy was bringing up.
Can I just tag on to what you're saying? I want to go back to when we first opened, and I was trying to talk about Kindred looking at culture and looking at cultural transformation as something that is created by us. And what would it be like if we had a culture that was created from people who were kept whole, intact, and allowed to reach their full optimal wellness? And over the years, trying to deliver this message, there was the conscious parenting movement and all these things that have happened in the United States trying to advocate for attachment. But again and again, what we ran into is what Darcia is saying is that people just heard it's not good enough. Oh, you extended the yardstick. Oh, now there's even more I have to do. Right. So we've tried again and again to keep pointing out, no, we're not saying mothers failed or fathers failed. We're saying mothers and fathers and families were failed by our culture. And that is why we have to keep the focus on what is the problem here and how is culture created and how are we going to create something different. And that's what this discussion, again, we're trying to get to. So just thank you for letting me clarify. Every time you come over to Kindred and you see we're advocating for, again, caring for babies, that is a hard thing to hear if your unmet infant needs are still sitting there waiting for someone to pick you up and care for you. Which is why we have all these nesting tools for you. And we do have a lot. So, okay. Who's next?
Janelle's next, but Carmela can't raise her hand, so she goes after Janelle. I just wanted to wave. Yeah, there we go.
Janelle, hi.
Hi there. I just wanted to try to answer Katie's question from my perspective, my personal experience as an older woman in this culture. So in 1975, my first child was born, and I worked in a daycare center when he was 1, and I took him with me. And at that time, you couldn't get children in a daycare center until they were 2 and potty trained. So when he was 3.5, I went to college, and I had a younger child as well. So they were 3.5 and 1. So 1979. And the messaging through the second wave of feminism was that we needed to get out there and make something of ourselves. And, I left a not good marriage, and he was not treating my son well, and I was not going to be there. So, my choice was to try to make a living or go to college. And so I went to college, and the messaging was just like, we're going to be empowered by our financial equality, and our children will be fine with any old caregiver. I think wasn't it Anacott? Is that his name? Somebody who said, one of the researchers early on.
Winnicott?
Yeah, Winnicott, who said basically any good caregiver will do, but that wasn't referring to anyone out there. It was about you being the best caregiver at any point with your child, because we're all going to fail and we're all going to have issues. So, every day you can be like, oh, I did the best I could today. But anyway, I wanted to answer that question because those people who were raised in the early daycare and since have grown up, and they're the nurses and the teachers and the social workers and the researchers, the lactation consultants, the lawyers, the judges. So now you'll have judges in this country who, well, I left my child at 6 weeks and I finished my degree and we're just fine. And it's normative abuse. Yeah. So that it just keeps perpetuating itself because we can't admit how harmed we were, like Lisa said. I get accused often of being a mother shamer, and I'm just talking about what babies need. And I'm not shaming mothers, I'm shaming the system that continues to do that. But that's one of the reasons that all those women that you're talking about, they experienced it as a baby, they did it to their babies, and now you're saying it's all wrong? Like, how do they even go there to be like, oh my God, we're so wounded. What do we do? And that's why the nest is so important. And some of the other work, like my teacher, Ray Castellino, a lot of the people are like, now we have some solutions. It's okay to acknowledge it because we can heal. We can heal in the brain. There's all the trauma healing work. So I'm hoping that's going to start shifting, but it's hard to realize, oh my God, I was so wounded as a baby. Instead of, oh, my mom was so powerful and she taught me how to be a strong, independent woman while she's bringing home the bacon. And remember that song back in the 70s? Oh. I'm a woman. I can bring home the bacon and fry it up and make my man never forget he's a man, or something like that, where you're just supposed to do it all. The messaging is so worth looking into.
Oh. Well, thanks so much, Janelle. Wonderful comment, giving us the historical perspective. Yeah, very helpful. In terms of Winnicott, D.W. Winnicott, I was just looking at some of his writing in the last week, and he talked about good enough mothering. And what he meant by that was the mother, this is naturalistic conditions, which is what he observed over years and years. The good enough mother anticipates the needs of the baby. She feels she is the baby and meets those needs without the baby having to express them. She always has the baby in mind. That's what a good enough mother is. You can't learn it from a book, he says. It's got to come from within. She can't make her breasts produce milk. She has to let, the process of being embodied. He didn't say the term embodied, but that's what he meant. You have to be in your body. And nurses and doctors often interfere with that, the bonding that's, the reward systems are ready to glom on right after birth to one another. And if you separate mom and baby, you've now undermined that deep bonding that can occur. But anyway, yeah, so Winnicott, the good enough mother. And I think what's happened in the developmental psychology world is, oh, it's good enough. And children are resilient. So you don't, it doesn't matter. You leave them, you train them to sleep alone. And as long as you're consistent in how you treat them, they'll be fine. Yeah, And you train a mouse to anticipate the shock in the cage, and they do much better than if they have random shocks, right? But that's not healthy. That's not flourishing. That's survival. And so what's happened is all this slip slide into not understanding what a baby is. And, I could go on. I'm sorry. I got on my soapbox about babies.
Darcia, Kathy Wallace is waving her hand, but after that, Kathy G had a question. So I'm just.
Carmela first, and Mara also had raised her hand.
Someone had their hand up and it went away.
Oh, and I think Tom too. But Carmela, go ahead. Mucho gusto.
Hola.
Estuvimos en Madrid hace un mes. Qué hermoso todo.
Sí, gracias. Es muy bonito. Yes, I'm sorry I missed. I didn't hear you were coming, so I missed you. Anyway, I just wanted to share that I have I feel very privileged because when I first heard about the nested I felt that it was my experience. I've been very fortunate. I have 5 siblings. We've all had children at the same time. So our children have grown up together. We've cross-nursed. We've taken care of each other's kids. And they're just such a wonderful, I mean, not now they're in their 20s. They're such a wonderful crowd. And I always remember that my daughter, my eldest one, when she was around 12 or 13, and because we also homeschooled, and she started to go out into the world with non-homeschooling people. She once told me, "Mom, will I ever find anybody like us?" And I thought that was I thought it was beautiful and kind of scary too, because she's going to go out there into the world with all the non-nested people. And I don't know, I felt kind of scared thinking maybe I had made her more vulnerable because of the way she had been brought up. So I'm glad to hear about the resilience, because of course she has to live in the normal world, and she'll probably have a partner who is not nested, or I don't know, but still it was kind of frightening for me to hear her say that. And then I also wanted, I put it on the chat, but just to give a little bit of hope. Things have been changing here. It's little steps, and of course there's always more bad than good in this area. But I have to say that from the European Institute of Perinatal Mental Health, we've been having Nils Bergman over like since 2014 every year, to teach neonatologists, pediatricians, and it's beautiful to see the changes that have been happening in these last 15 years. So thank you. That's from him, is from where I heard about you, Darcia, and it's been wonderful to read all your work. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the voice of hope, both with your children, because we need more nested people in the world, right? And that they have those instincts to nest others as well. That's how we transform the world. Each of us can do that. And then the neonatal care. Yes, thank you so much. I'm so glad that things are changing. Thank you, Nils. So marvelous, his work on kangaroo care, and his recent paper that talks about zero separation. That should be the norm, right, for any baby, any birth experience. Zero separation of baby and mother. So hopefully we'll get there all over the world. Thanks. All right, how about Mara? And then, okay, and then Jackie.
And
yeah, okay.
Eugene, thank you for such a wonderful presentation. It was a nice surprise today. I didn't know that was going to occur, but I had 2 questions. One was if on that measure of an evolved nest, a factor analysis has been run on it, and how many factors and what are they? And then the second one, Darcia, I love your meditations. And do you have any on that are downloadable to listen to? Because I have a lot that I listen to, but yours are you have such a musical voice. It's very comforting. And I didn't know, just a thought.
Thanks. No, I haven't recorded any. When I had my own
entire reimagining humanity is Darcia leading you through.
That's true. All the movies.
Meditation for 12 minutes. I'm sorry, Darcia. I'm like, yeah, we got a good one. Sorry, go ahead.
When I had my own business teaching Spanish to adults using super learning. Super learning is where you relax people, so you help them visualize. That kind of approach I use, so I have a lot of practice doing those kinds of visualizations. And then you introduce new information while they're still relaxed, and then you play with it, you act it out and all that stuff. So that's super learning. But yeah, so maybe we'll have to do some recordings. In terms of a factor analysis, yeah, our first paper with this measure was in 2016 that was published, and it comes into one factor. It was one factor. So I did it with very superb quantitative folks, since I'm not a quantitative person. And that's what we found. If you want the paper, it's somewhere. I could try to find it. Are you interested in reading that? Or?
I would love to. I'm a psychologist, so yes, I would love to.
Okay. I'll look for it. Now, okay, thank you, Mara, for your questions.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tom. Yes. Hi.
Hi, thank you. You know, the prominent model for ACEs research has been the cumulative risk model, and your work and Eugene's work is showing also a cumulative protection model. But
Yeah.
what's happening now in ACEs research, the cumulative risk model is basically understanding between group differences, looking at those with low ACEs and those with high ACEs. But now what's happening with ACEs research is saying, let's look at within group differences, that certain ACEs will have different neurobiological impacts. And I'm wondering if, you know, the next generation of research might show that different types of the experiences with the evolved nest might produce different effects and explain some within group differences, so that somebody that's high in self-directed play may have certain relational behaviors that are different from somebody that's high in physical touch. And so I'm just anticipating that, you know, if the ACEs research is maturing into, you know, finding ways to explain within group differences, might we also see some ways of thinking about explaining within group differences from the evolved nest? Just a thought.
Yep. Very good. Very nice. Yes, I agree. There's and the timing, because when we're babies, so many systems are coming online, and then they're assuming they're getting what they need to develop in their optimal form, and then another system builds on that one, and so timing is going to really matter. And unfortunately, we can't monitor babies to know how they're. I mean, there are some experiments where they have like a microphone on the baby or something, so they can um, figure out how much speech they're hearing, but I don't know if you can do touch and responsiveness and eye contact. I mean, there's so many things. Yeah, so that's yeah, really important point there. There's a lot of variability in our nestedness, likely in our contemporary world. Now, in our ancestral context, the hunter-gatherer civilization, we're nomadic foragers, where we spent most of our history, 95 to 99% of our history as a human genus. 99% as a genus, 95% as a species. The babies are just the center of life. You don't let them cry. You're carrying them around no matter what else you're doing. So there's not going to be. There's one, I think Elizabeth Marshall Thomas in her book, I think it was Harmless People. She talks about one child that was kind of cried a lot and it was different from all the other children. And she asked, well, what happened? He spent some time in the hospital when he was young. So the very cooperative, happy-go-lucky kind of very attuned way of being, he just got upset more easily. He stress reacted to some degree, yeah. Okay, so Katie. Oh, I'm sorry. I have that was my hand arrow that was doing it. Thigh or Thee? How do you say your name, Wallace? Oh, that's Kathy. I'm sorry, my screen is all weird. Sorry about that. Kathy, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, so my thinking is, I think you mentioned whole body research. It needs to be expanded on. I think it was in 2001, there was a picture that went all over the internet of a babe in the womb who had to be operated on by a doctor. And the picture was of that babe's little finger in the womb, the babe's little hand in the womb holding the finger of the doctor operating on the babe. I think sovereign agency is a big piece that needs to be explored. And so thinking about that picture of that babe in the womb having a sovereign agency with that picture, in the womb, a mother gifts everything she has to the babe in the womb, nourishing, cherishing, supporting, and there's a complete reciprocal sharing and gifting of everything back and forth, back and forth. So there's also been research done which indicates that a babe in the womb helps heal a mother if there's need. So that reciprocal sharing back and forth between the mother and the babe in the womb. So, and that's what creates healthy, flourished, birthed babies. So why would it not be, and of course, that kind of continued reciprocity and 100% gifting of the mother to the babe would not be required outside the womb once it's born. So that learned experience inside the womb between the mother and the babe needs to be explored more. And it would be a validation of healthy, continued, nested treatment like that after birth, and may explain and justify why mothers choose to abort, because they know that they're bringing a babe into a world that it cannot survive in a healthy, flourished, nested way. So I'm suggesting that there's a whole body of research that needs to be done around how a babe is grown in a healthy, strong, flourishing, nested way inside the womb, and that justifies the exact same treatment has to be continued outside the womb, which means, of course, our current world would not be justified because it destroys us once we're born.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. We know that compared to other animals, we're like fetuses until about 2 years of age. So that's another justification that we have so many systems and the brain is growing so rapidly. We need that immediate responsive care that nestedness provides. There's quite a number of studies now on stress during gestation, in the mom being stressed, and that affecting then at least what's been studied, the reactivity stress response, and how you end up with a more irritable baby, who is going to be harder to take care of course, and so you need to be even more responsive in that case. But in terms of the more delicate kinds of things, it's also true that if it's a first-time birth, your placenta is not as rich, your womb is not as rich. It's actually better from an evolutionary perspective or from a health perspective to actually have a miscarriage in the first baby, and then your womb will be more rich for the next offspring. So, yeah, a few things we know, but certainly not what we should know. Yeah, thank you.
I don't want to, I know it's getting to the end, but Jackie Friedman, I think,
Yeah.
he says that
yes.
I don't know, I'm having trouble speaking. I heard a story of a teacher who wore a kangaroo pouch, and when her students had a hard time, she would put their name in the pouch instead of using punishment chart, where the students' names move up and down. I don't know why Jackie's having trouble speaking, but I think that's really beautiful, what the repercussions of that.
No, I've strained my voice. I remember hearing that story, and I looked her up, and I guess she was doing the touch with the kangaroo. They did the kangaroo. She was in South Africa, and I think it said on there, skin to skin contact. So I was just thinking, what a beautiful thing to put their names in the pouch instead of just moving their names up and down.
Oh, it's horrible. The punishment stuff doesn't happen in our ancestral context. No punishment. That separates you, that gets you self-centered. You don't want to do things because you're going to get punished. So you lose your inner compass, your inner directedness. You get externally focused. which is actually what Western European culture has wanted, that you punish children on purpose so that they learn to obey. And then when they're older and they develop their own autonomy and free will, then they can choose to follow some rules on their own. So they go from being what they call heteronomous, oriented to law outside themselves, and then they're supposed to be able to, adopt a autonomous, self-directed way of being. And that the indigenous folks of the world, Native Americans, were appalled at this idea. It's crazy, right? Why would you break, in my words, the inner compass and then assume that you can fix it later? So, yeah, a lot of crazy stuff from unnested people who've been guiding us for hundreds of years. So our time is up. We had a great discussion here. Thank you, Eugene, and thanks everyone for your contributions. And yeah, thank you. And let's just take a moment to breathe deeply and get back into that heart space and feel it in our own bodies. Wherever we are now, we can be present with heart to whomever we meet. And that means plants, trees, waterway, wind, animals, people. We can meet them with our heart mind and be flexible and attuned. Don't worry, we're here together. We are earthlings, all one. And so we can practice being present, letting go of our own concerns and our bracing reactions, let those loosen up. Come back to heart-centeredness and connection. We all can do that. So feel now your heart, your belly all alive with love and energy, and feel it connecting to all the hearts here in our circle. All the bellies, all the hearts connected as one unit of oneness. Who can transform that? Can transform the world. So let's take that with us now. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be sending you an email with a recording and the resources we shared in the chat, and some other places we can reconnect after. The kindredcommunity.org is our Mighty Networks platform, and you can go there and meet each other afterwards. So thank you again.